There was one language and one dialect in all the land. When they moved from the east, they found a plain in the land of Sinnah and settled there. And they said to one another, "Let's make bricks and burn them with fire." And they made bricks instead of stones, and tar of earth instead of lime. And they said, "Let us build us a city and a tower, whose top may reach unto heaven, and let us make us a name." And the Lord came down to see the city and the tower, which the sons of men had built. And the Lord said, "Behold, the people is one, and they have all one language, and this is what they have begun to do, and they will not fail in what they have planned to do. And let us go down, and there confound their language, so that one may not understand the speech of another." And the Lord scattered them from thence over all the land, and they ceased to build the city. Therefore its name was given to it Babylon, for there the Lord mingled the language of all the earth, and from thence the Lord scattered them abroad upon the face of all the earth. This is the genealogy of Shem. Shem was 100 years old, and begat Arphaxad 2 years after the flood. And after Arphaxad was born, Shem lived 500 years, and begat sons and daughters. Arphaxad lived 35 years, and begat Salah. Upon the birth of Salah, Arphaxad lived for 103 years, and gave birth to sons and daughters. Salah lived 30 years, and gave birth to Ur. Upon the birth of Eber, Salah lived for 103 years, and begat sons and daughters. Eber lived 34 years, and gave birth to Phalec. Upon the birth of Phalec, Ur lived for 130 years, and gave birth to sons and daughters. Phalec lived 30 years, and gave birth to Ragab. After Ragab was born, Phalec lived 109 years, and bore sons and daughters. Ragav lived 32 years, and gave birth to Serug. 21 After the flood 2 years were over, he begat Arphaxad. And after Arphaxad was born, Shem lived 500 years, and begat sons and daughters. Arphaxad lived 35 years, and begat Salah. Upon the birth of Salah, Arphaxad lived for 103 years, and gave birth to sons and daughters. Salah lived 30 years, and gave birth to Ur. Upon the birth of Eber, Salah lived for 103 years, and begat sons and daughters. Eber lived 34 years, and gave birth to Phalec. Upon the birth of Phalec, Ur lived for 130 years, and gave birth to sons and daughters. Phalec lived 30 years, and gave birth to Ragab. After Ragab was born, Phalec lived 109 years, and bore sons and daughters. Ragav lived 32 years, and gave birth to Serug. After Sarah was born, Ragav lived 107 years, and gave birth to sons and daughters. Sarah lived 30 years, and gave birth to Nahor. After Nahor was born, Sarah lived 100 years, and gave birth to sons and daughters. Nahor lived 29 years, and gave birth to Pharaoh. Upon the birth of Pharaoh, Nahor lived 119 years, and gave birth to sons and daughters. Pharaoh lived 70 years, and gave birth to Abram, Nahor, and Aaron. This is the genealogy of Pharaoh. Pharaoh gave birth to Abram, Nahor, and Aaron. Aaron gave birth to Lot. And Aaron died under Phar, his father, in the land of his birth, and of the Chaldees. And Abram and Nahor took themselves wives. And the name of Abram's wife was Sarah, and the name of Nahor's wife was Milcah, the daughter of Aaron the father of Milcah, and the father of Iscah. And Sarah was barren and childless. And Terah took Abram his son, and Lot the son of Haran his son's son, and Sarai his daughter-in-law, his son Abram's wife, and they went forth with them from Ur of the Chaldees, to go into the land of Canaan, and they came unto Haran, and dwelt there. And the days of Pharaoh's life were 205 years. And go from your land, from your kindred, and from your father's house, to a land that I will show you. And I will make of thee a great nation, and I will bless thee, and make thy name great, and thou shalt be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you, and I will curse those who curse you, and all the tribes of the earth shall be blessed in you. And Abram went as the Lord had said to him, and Lot went with him. Abram was 75 years old when he left Haran. And Abram took Sarai his wife with him, and Lot his brother's son, and all the possessions that they had acquired, and all the people that they had in Haran, and they went out to go into the land of Canaan, and they came into the land of Canaan. And Abram passed through this land unto the place of Shechem, unto the oak tree of Moreh. In this land then lived the Canaanites. And the Lord appeared to Abram and said, To your offspring I will give this land. And he built there an altar to the Lord, appeared to him. And from thence he went to the mountain east of Bethel, and he pitched his tent so that from it Bethel was to the west, and gazed to the east, and he built there an altar to the Lord, and called upon the name of the Lord. And Abram went up, and continued on his way southward. And there was a famine in that land. And Abram went down to Egypt to live there, because the famine had increased in that land. And as he was approaching Egypt, he said to Sarah his wife, Behold, I know that you are a woman, beautiful in appearance. And when the Egyptians shall see thee, they shall say, This is his wife, and they shall kill me. But they shall let thee live. Say, I pray thee, Thou art my sister, that it may be well with me for thy sake, and my soul shall live because of thee. And it came to pass, when Abram came into Egypt, that the Egyptians saw that she was a very beautiful woman. And the nobles of Pharaoh also saw her, and commended her to Pharaoh, and she was taken unto the house of Pharaoh. And Abram was well pleased for her sake, and he had small and large cattle, and donkeys, and slaves, and maidservants, and horses and camels. But the Lord struck Pharaoh and his house with heavy blows for Sarai, Abram's wife. And Pharaoh called Abram and said, Why have you done this to me, or for why have you not told me that she is your wife? Why didst thou say, She is my sister-in-law, and I took her to be my wife? And now here is your wife to take and go. And Pharaoh gave the people a charge concerning him, and they carried him out, and his wife, and all that himself and his wife, and all that he had, and Lot with him southward. And Abram was very rich in cattle, and in silver, and in gold. And he continued his passages from the south as far as Bethel, to the place where his tent was before, between Bethel and between Gaius, to the place of the altar which he had made there at the beginning now. And there Abram called on the name of the Lord. And Lot, who walked with Abram, also had small and large cattle and tents. And the land was incompatible for them to live together, for their possessions were so great that they could not live together. And there was a dispute between the shepherds of Abram's cattle and between the shepherds of Lot's cattle, and the Canaanites and the Perizzites lived in that land. And Abram said to Lot, Let there be no strife between me and you, nor between my shepherds and your shepherds, for we are kinsmen. And if thou goest to the left, then I will go to the right, and if thou goest to the right, then I will go to the left. And Lot lifted up his eyes and saw all the land around Jordan, which before the Lord destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah, it was flooded with water, even to Seor, like the garden of the Lord, like the land of Egypt. And Lot chose all the land around Jordan for himself, and he turned eastward. And they were separated one from another. And Abram dwelt in the land of Canaan, and Lot dwelt in the cities of the surrounding country, and pitched his tents as far as Sodom. And the inhabitants of Sodom were wicked and very sinful before the Lord. And the Lord said to Abram, after Lot was separated from him, For all the land which thou seest, I will give unto thee, and unto thy seed forever. And I will make thy offspring as the sand of the earth. If any man can count the sand of the earth, the offspring shall also be counted. Rise, walk through this land in its length and breadth, for I will give it to you. And Abram moved his tent, and went, and dwelt in the oak tree of Mamre, which is in Hebron now. In the days of Amraphel king of Seneh, Eric king of Elasar, Chedorlaomer king of Elam, and Tidal king of Goim. And they made war with Beri king of Sodom, and with Bersha king of Gomorrah, and with Shinab king of Admah, and with Shemeber king of Zeboyam, and with Bilek king of Zor, which is Zor. All these were united in the valley of Siddim, where now is the sea of salt. For 12 years they were in bondage to Chedorlaomer, and in the 13th year they were in rebellion. In the 14th year came Chedorlaomer and the kings that were with him, and smote the Rephaims in Ashtaroth-Karnaim, the Zuzims in Ham, the Emiss in Shaphir-Haimat, and the Horites in their mountain Seir, as far as Elipharan, which is by the wilderness. And when they returned from there, they came to the spring of Mispat, which is Kadesh, and smote the whole country of the Amalecites, and also the Amorites, who dwell in Hatzazphomar, and the king of Sodom, the king of Gomorrah, the king of Admah, the king of Zebez, and the king of Belo, which is Sigurah, and they went out to battle with them in the valley of Siddim, with Chedorlaomer, king of Elam, Phidol, king of Goim, Amraphel, king of Seneh, Eric, king of Elasar, 4 kings against 5. And there were many tar pits in the valley of Siddim, and the kings of Sodom and Gomorrah fled and fell into them, and the rest fled into the mountains. The conquerors took all the possessions of Sodom and Gomorrah and all their stock, and went away. And they took Lot, Abram's nephew, who lived in Sodom, and his possessions, and departed. And one of the survivors came and informed Abram the Hebrew, who was then living at the oak tree of Mamre, the Amorite, brother Escola, and brother Anra, who were Abram's elders. Abram, hearing that his kinsman had been taken captive, armed his slaves born in his house, 318, and pursued the enemy as far as Dan, and divided, and attacked them by night, himself and his servants, and smote them, and pursued them as far as Hoval, which is on the left side of Damascus. And he returned all his possessions, and Lot his kinsman, and his goods, and the women and the people. When he was returning after the defeat of Chedorlaomer and the kings who were with him, the king of Sodom came out to meet him in the valley of Shave, which is now the valley of the king. And Melchizedek the king of Salem brought out bread and wine, for he was a priest of the Most High God. And he blessed him, and said, Blessed is Abram of the Most High God, the ruler of heaven and earth. And blessed is God Most High, who has delivered your enemies into your hands. Abram gave him 1/10 of everything. And the king of Sodom said to Abram, give me the man, but take the possessions for yourself. But Abram said to the king of Sodom, I lift up my hand to the Lord God Almighty, ruler of heaven and earth, that I will not even take a thread or a shoe strap out of all your possessions, lest you say, I have made Abram rich. Accept what the young men have eaten, and accept the portion belonging to the men who have walked with me, O Aner, Eshcol, and Mamre spoke to Abram in a vision, saying, do not be afraid, Abram, I am your shield, and your reward is very great. Abram said, Lord, Lord, what will you give me? I remain childless, of the steward in my house is this Eliezer of Damascus. And Abram said, behold, you have not given me offspring, and behold, my householder is my heir. And the word of the Lord came to him, and he said, he will not be your heir, but the one who comes from your loins will be your heir. And he brought him out, and said, look up into heaven, and count the stars, if you can count them. And he said to him, that is how many offspring you will have. And Abram said, behold, you have not given me offspring, and behold, heir to my household. And the word of the Lord came to him, and he said, he will not be your heir, but the one who comes from your loins will be your heir. And he brought him out, and said, look up into heaven, and count the stars, if you can count them. And he said to him, that is how many offspring you will have. Abram believed the Lord, and he accounted it to him as righteousness. And he said to him, I am the Lord, who brought you out of the Chaldees to give you this land to possess. He said, O Lord of hosts, by what shall I know that I shall possess it? The Lord said to him, take me a 3-year-old heifer, a 3-year-old goat, a 3-year-old sheep, a turtle dove, and a young dove. He took them all, cut them in half, and put one part against the other, only the birds were not cut. And the birds of prey swooped down on the corpses, but Abram drove them away. At sunset a sound sleep came upon Abram, and behold, a terror and a great darkness came upon him. And the Lord said to Abram, know that your descendants will be strangers in a land not their own, and will enslave them, and oppress them for 400 years. But I will execute judgment upon the people from whom they shall be enslaved. After this they shall come out with great possessions, and thou shalt go back unto thy fathers in peace, and shalt be buried in a good old age. In the 4th generation they shall return here, for the measure of the iniquity of the Amorites is not yet filled. When the sun had set and darkness had come, behold, smoke as it were from a furnace and flames of fire passed between the dissected animals. On this day the Lord made a covenant with Abram, saying, to your offspring I give this land, from the river of Egypt to the great river, the river Euphrates, Keni, Kenziwi, Kedmoni, the Hittites, the Perizzites, the Rephimes. Amraver, Hanani's wife, did not give birth to him. She had an Egyptian maid, named Hagar. And Sarai said unto Abram, behold, the Lord hath shut up my womb, that I should not bear children, but come unto my maid, that I may have children by her. Abram obeyed Sarah's words. And Sarai, Abram's wife, took Hagar, her maid the Egyptian, after Abram had dwelt 10 years in the land of Canaan, and gave her to her husband Abram to be his wife. And he went into Hagar, and she conceived. And when she saw that she had conceived, she began to despise her mistress. And Sarai said to Abram, my offense is against you, I have given my handmaid into your bosom. And she, when she saw that she conceived, hath despised me. And Sarai, Abram's wife, took Hagar, her maid the Egyptian, after Abram had dwelt 10 years in the land of Canaan, and gave her to her husband Abram as wife. And he went into Hagar, and she conceived. And when she saw that she had conceived, she began to despise her mistress. And Sarai said to Abram, my offense is against you, I have given my handmaid into your bosom. And she, when she saw that she conceived, hath despised me. And Abram said unto Sarah, behold, the handmaid is in thy hands, do unto her as thou wilt. And Sarah began to oppress her, and she fled from her. And the angel of the Lord found her at the spring of water in the wilderness, at the spring on the road to Sur. And he said to her, Hagar, handmaid of Sarin, where have you come from, and where are you going? And she said, I am fleeing from the face of Sarai my mistress. The angel of the Lord said to her, return to your mistress and submit to her. And the angel of the Lord said to her, I will multiply your descendants, so that you cannot count them out of the multitude. And the angel of the Lord said to her, behold, you are with child, and you shall bear a son, and you shall call his name Ishmael, for the Lord has heard your suffering. And he shall be among men like a wild ass, his hands shall be upon all, and all hands upon him, and he shall lie in the presence of all his brethren. And Hagar called the Lord who spoke to her by this name, you are the God who sees me. For she said, surely I have seen here in the footsteps of him who sees me. The name of the fountain is called Beer-lahai. It is between Kadesh and between Bared. And Hagar bore Abram his son, and Abram called his son born of Hagar Ishmael. Abram was 86 years old when Hagar bore Ishmael. And the Lord appeared to Abram and said to him, I am God Almighty, walk before me and be blameless, and I will make my covenant between me and you, and I will multiply you very, very much. And Abraham fell on his face to speak to him, and said, I am my covenant with you, and you shall be a father of many nations, and you shall no more be called Abraham, but your name shall be Abraham, for I will make you a father of many nations, and I will very cleave thee, and make of thee nations, and kings shall come from thee. And I will make my covenant between me and you, and between your descendants after you and their generations, an everlasting covenant, that I will be your God and your descendants after you. And I will give you and your descendants after you the land through which you wander, all the land of Canaan, for an everlasting possession, and I will be their God. And God said to Abraham, But you shall keep my covenant, you and your descendants after you in their generations. This is my covenant, which you shall keep between me and you, and between your descendants after you, that all the male sex may be circumcised among you. Circumcise your foreskin now, and this shall be the sign of the covenant between me and you. And 8 days from the birth of a child, that every male child that is born in your house and is bought for money from a foreigner, who is not of your seed, shall be circumcised from you in your generations. By all means let him who is born in your house and bought for your silver be circumcised, and my covenant shall be upon your body, an everlasting covenant. But he that is in circus mates of men, who shall not circumcise his foreskin, that soul shall be cut off from his people, for he hath broken my covenant. And God said to Abraham, Sarai your wife shall not be called Sarai, but let her name be Sarah. I will bless her, and I will give thee a son by her. I will bless her, and nations shall come from her, and kings of nations shall come from her. And Abraham fell on his face, and laughed, and said within himself, Surely a son will be born of him who is 100 years old, and Sarah is 90 years old. Will she not bear children? And Abraham said to God, Oh, I wish Ishmael were alive before you. And God said, It is Sarah your wife who will bear you a son, and you shall call his name Isaac, and I will make my covenant with him, an everlasting covenant, and his offspring after him. And concerning Ishmael I have heard thee, behold, I will bless him, and raise him up, and greatly multiply him. 12 princes shall be born of him, and I will make of him a great nation. But I will make my covenant with Isaac, whom Sarah will bear you at this time in the next year. And God stopped speaking to Abraham and went up from him. And Abraham took Ishmael his son, and all those born in his house, and all those bought with his silver, all the male sex of the men of Abraham's household, and he circumcised their foreskin that very day as God had told him. Abraham was 99 years old when his foreskin was circumcised, and Ishmael his son was 13 years old when his foreskin was circumcised. On the same day Abraham and Ishmael his son were circumcised, and with him were circumcised all the male sex of his house, those born in the house and bought for silver of Mamre, when he was sitting at the entrance of the tent in the heat of the day. He lifted up his eyes and looked, and behold, 3 men were standing against him. When he saw them, he ran towards them from the entrance of the tent, and bowed down to the ground, and said, O Lord, if I have found favor before thy eyes, do not pass by thy servant. And they shall bring some water, and wash your feet down, and rest under this tree. And I will bring bread, and you shall feed your hearts, so then go, for you are going by your servant. They said, Do as you say. And Abraham hastened to Sarah's tent, and said, Knead 3 sats of the best flour, and make 11 loaves. And Abraham ran to the flock, and took the tender and good calf, and gave it to the boy to prepare it. And he took the butter and the milk, and the calf that had been cooked, and set it before them. And he himself stood under a tree beside them. And they said to him, Where is Sarah your wife? He answered, Here in the tent. And one of them said, I will be with you again at this time, and Sarah your wife will have a son. And Sarah was listening at the entrance of the tent at the back of it. And Abraham and Sarah were old and in advanced years, and Sarah's usual with the women ceased. Sarah laughed inwardly, saying, Am I, when I am old, to have this comfort, and my Lord is old? And the Lord said to Abraham, Why did Sarah laugh, saying, Am I really able to give birth when I am old? Is there anything hard for the Lord? At the appointed time I will be with you next year, and Sarah will have a son. But Sarah did not confess, but said, I did not laugh, for she was afraid. But he said, No, you have laughed. And those men arose and went from there to Sodom, and Abraham went with them to escort them. And the Lord said, Will I withhold from Abraham what I want to do? From Abraham there shall surely come forth a nation great and strong, and in it all the nations of the earth shall be blessed. For I have chosen him to command his sons and his house after him to walk in the way of the Lord, doing righteousness and judgment, and the Lord will fulfill over Abraham what he said about him. And the Lord said, The cry of Sodom and Gomorrah, great is it in their sin. Heavy is it. I will go down and see whether they do these things accurately, which the cry is upon them that goeth up to me, or not, and I will know. I will be with you again at this time, and Sarah your wife will have a son. And Sarah was listening at the entrance of the tent at the back of it. And Abraham and Sarah were old and in advanced years, and Sarah's usual with the women ceased. Sarah laughed inwardly, saying, Am I, when I am old, to have this comfort, and my Lord is old? And the Lord said to Abraham, Why did Sarah laugh, saying, Am I really able to give birth when I am old? Is there anything hard for the Lord? At the appointed time I will be with you next year, and Sarah will have a son. But Sarah did not confess, but said, I did not laugh, for she was afraid. But he said, No, you have laughed. And those men arose and went from there to Sodom, and Abraham went with them to escort them. And the Lord said, Will I withhold from Abraham what I want to do? From Abraham there shall surely come forth a nation great and strong, and in it all the nations of the earth shall be blessed. For I have chosen him to command his sons and his house after him to walk in the way of the Lord, to do in righteousness and judgment, and the Lord will fulfill over Abraham what he said about him. And the Lord said, The cry of Sodom and Gomorrah great is it, and their sin heavy is it. I will go down and see whether they do these things accurately, which the cry is upon them that goeth up to me, or not, and I will know. And the men turned from thence, and departed to Sodom, but Abraham yet stood before the Lord. And Abraham came and said, Will you destroy the righteous with the wicked? Is it possible that there are 50 righteous people in the city, or would you destroy and not spare this place for the sake of the 50 righteous people who are in it? It cannot be that thou wouldest do so, that thou wouldest destroy the righteous with the wicked, that the same might be done to the righteous as to the wicked. It cannot be of thee, will the judge of all the earth do wrong. The Lord said, If I find 50 righteous men in the city of Sodom, I will spare all this place for their sake. Abraham answered, Behold, I have resolved to speak to the Lord, dust and ashes. There may not be 50 righteous men enough. For want of 5, wouldst thou destroy the whole city? He said, I will not destroy it if I find 45 there. Abraham spoke to him again, saying, Can there be 40? He said, I will not do so even for 40. And Abraham said, May the Lord not be angry that I should say, And may I find 30 there? And he said, I will not do it, if there are 30 there. Abraham said, Behold, I have resolved to say to the Lord, May there be 20 found there. He said, I will not for the sake of 20. Abraham said, May the Lord not be angry if I say one more time, And may there be 10 there. He said, I will not slay for the sake of 10. And the Lord went away, ceasing to speak to Abraham. Came to Sodom in the evening, while Lot was sitting at the gate of Sodom. And Lot saw, and arose to meet them, and worshipped with his face to the ground. And he said, My lords, enter into your servant's house, and spend the night, and wash your feet, and rise in the morning, and go your way. But they said, No, we will spend the night outside. But he urged them on, and they went to him, and came into his house. He made them a feast and baked unleavened bread, and they ate. They had not yet gone to bed when the people of the city, Sodomites from young to old, all the people from every part of the city, surrounded the house. And they called Lot and said to him, Where are the people who have come to you tonight? To bring them out to us, so we will know them. And Lot went out to their door, and shut it behind him. And he said, My brothers, do no harm. Behold, I have 2 daughters who have not known their husbands. I would rather bring them out to you, and do with them as you please. But do nothing for these people, for they have come under the roof of my house. They said, Come here. And they said, Behold, here is a stranger who wants to judge, and now we will do worse to you than to them. And they came very near to this man Lot, and they came to break down the door. So the men stretched out their hands, and led Lot into their house, and shut the door. And they struck the men that were at the door of the house with blindness, from the least of them to the greatest of them, so that they were weary when they sought to enter in. And those men said to Lot, Is there any man that thou hast here, thy son-in-the-law, thy sons, thy daughters, and howsoever is with thee in the city, thou shalt bring them all forth out of the place. Or we will destroy this place, because the cry against its people to the Lord is great, and the Lord has sent us to destroy it. And Lot went out and spoke to his sons-in-the-law, who had taken his daughters for themselves, and said, Arise, come out of this place, for the Lord will destroy this city. But his sons-in-law thought he was joking. When the dawn rose, angels began to hasten Lot, saying, Arise, take your wife and your 2 daughters who are with you, lest you perish for the iniquities of the city. And as he hesitated, those men, in the mercy of the Lord, took him by the hand, and his wife, and his 2 daughters, and brought him out, and set him outside the city. And when they had brought them out, one of them said, Save your soul, do not look back, and do not stay anywhere in this neighborhood, or flee to the mountain, lest you perish. But Lot said to them, No, master. Behold, your servant has found favor before your eyes, and great is your mercy, which you have done to me, that you have saved my life. But I cannot flee to the mountain, lest trouble come upon me, and I should perish. Behold, it is nearer that I should flee to this city, For it is small, I will flee there. For it is small, and my life shall be preserved. And he said to him, Behold, I will do this also to please you. I will not overthrow the city of which you speak. Hasten to save yourself there, for I cannot do the work until you get there. For this reason the city is called Sigar. The sun rose over the land, and Lot came to Zoar. And the Lord rained sulfur and fire from the Lord out of heaven on Sodom and Gomorrah, and destroyed these cities, and all the countryside, and all the inhabitants of these cities, and the growth of the land. And Lot's wife looked behind him, and became a pillar of salt. And Abraham arose early in the morning, and went to the place where he stood before the face of the Lord. And he looked toward Sodom and Gomorrah and all the countryside, and saw, behold, smoke rising from the ground like smoke from a furnace. And it came to pass, as God was destroying the cities of the neighborhood, that God remembered Abraham, and sent Lot out of the midst of the destruction, when he overthrew the cities in which Lot dwelt. And Lot went out of Sihorah, and dwelt in the mountain, and his 2 daughters with him. For he was afraid to dwell in Sihorah, and he lived in a cave, and his 2 daughters with him. And the eldest said to the youngest, Our father is old, and there is no man in the land who will come into us according to the custom of all the land. Therefore let us give our father wine to drink, and let us sleep with him, and raise up our father's tribe. And they gave their father wine that night, and the eldest came in, and slept with her father, and he knew not when she lay down, nor when she rose. And the second day the elder said to the younger, Lo, I slept with my father the night before, and we will give him drunk wine that night also, and thou shalt go in and sleep with him, and raise up our father into our tribe. And they gave his father wine to drink this night also, and the younger entered in, and slept with him, and he knew not when she lay down, nor when she rose. And both the daughters of Lot were made pregnant by their father. And the eldest gave birth to a son, and called his name Moab. He is the father of the Moabites until now. And the younger also bore a son, and called his name Ben-Ammi. He is the father of the Ammonites, and dwelt between Kadesh and between Surah, and was for a time in Gerar. And Abraham said of Sarah his wife, She is my sister. And Abimelech king of Gerar sent Abimelech, and took Sarah. And God came to Abimelech by night in a dream, and said to him, Behold, you will die for the woman you have taken, for she is a husband. But Abimelech did not touch her, and said, O Lord, will you also destroy an innocent people? Didn't he himself say to me, She is my sister? And she herself said, He is my brother. I did it in the simplicity of my heart and in the purity of my hands. And God said to him in the dream, And I know that you did these things in the simplicity of your heart, and have kept you from sinning before me. Therefore I did not allow you to touch her. But now thou shalt give her back unto her husband, for he is a prophet, and he will pray for thee, and thou shalt live. But if thou wilt not give her back, thou shalt surely die, and all thy folk. And Abimelech arose early in the morning, and called all his servants, and spake all these words in their ears, and these people were very afraid. So Abimelech called Abraham, and said to him, What have you done to us? What have I sinned against you, that you have brought a great sin upon me, and upon my kingdom? You have done to me such things as they do not do. And Abimelech said to Abraham, What did you mean when you did this work? Abraham said, I thought, there is no fear of God in this place, and they will kill me for my wife. And indeed she is indeed my sister, she is my father's daughter, and not my mother's daughter, and she is become my wife. When God led me to wander from my father's house, I said to her, Do this mercy toward me on whatever place we come, everywhere we speak of me, saying, This is my brother. And Abimelech took small and large cattle, and slaves, and made her stands, and gave them to Abraham, and he returned Sarah his wife to him. And Abimelech said, Behold, my land is before thee, O dwell where thou wilt. And Sarah said, Behold, I have given thy brother 1,000 shekels of silver of gold. This is a covering for thy eyes before all that are with thee, and before all that art justified. And Abraham prayed to God, and God healed Abimelech and his wife, and his maid stands, and they began to give birth. For the Lord sealed every womb in the house of Abimelech for Sarah, Abraham's wife.